way back, right after I was widowed. I met quite a few men. And one of the men that I met, he shared with me on the first date, which he shouldn't have, that he and his wife spent $250,000 battling each other, and that it wasn't still over.
The closure you think you're going to get doesn't come because it's still an ongoing relationship. It's still this constant battle.
Today, Alex Howard and Amanda Silver from the podcast Dirty Laundry is joining me to discuss the ins and outs of mediation and divorce, particularly when you're trying to lead a manipulative or abusive partner. Both of these women are professional family mediators in the Toronto area, and if you haven't listened to their podcast, you're going to find these two mix a lot of fun and lightheartedness despite a pretty tough and messy topic. I'm so excited today to be joined by Alex and Amanda from Dirty Laundry, a podcast that's amazing, that talks a lot about legal issues and the messiness of relationships when we're ending them and what happens when we try to deal with it when we get into kind of litigation and mediation. Why don't you both tell me a little bit about what you do, and then let's talk about what goes wrong in the court, what you see happen that people get confused about as they start to move through divorce or through custody.
Sure. So we're both family law mediators and we have different backgrounds. My background is in education and Alex's background is in event planning. And we both came to this career in different ways. I went through a divorce. Alex is a child of divorce. And so what we do is we help families through the divorce and separation process and help them get to a resolution by staying out of court. So they come to us, they meet with us, we help them go through all of the choices and decisions that they need to make to resolve their family law issues. And then we, started this podcast because we thought that there was really a need for information. Both of us going through this process sort of felt, if I could speak for Alex, sort of felt like kind of blindsided and sort of fish out of water in this process. And so we wanted to be able to provide information to the masses and also bring some light and levity to a very difficult topic and a difficult transition that people are going through.
Yeah, as you said, it is messy, it is difficult. So our goal is how can we make this least scarring, if you will, on the parties involved and predominantly on the children, right? Because they're usually the ones that really get the short end of the stick, if you will.
I love your podcast because the two of you are hilarious, which is really, you're right. Because it's a hoot and holler to listen to you two. But it is a very painful situation because one of the things I'm seeing that happens is that because I work a lot, I'm a retired psychologist and I work a lot with people who have been through a very conflictual relationship, a narcissistically abusive relationship, and that they walk out feeling like there's no justice. Because what happens, it happens behind closed doors. It's not a public experience usually. So people don't see them getting abused or hit or called names. They don't see the course of control and know just the misery they've been in. So they walk in hoping to have it be seen and have it be validated. So have you experienced that? And then can you understand a little bit more what you see happens around those issues?
Yeah, it is so interesting. And I like that you say that people want to have their day in court. And ironically, Amanda and I spend our days trying to keep them out of it because no matter what kind of vindication you think you're going to get through the court process, you leave it almost worse. And of course, I'm not, we're speaking in generalizations here a little bit, but it is such an adversarial system when you have two litigators going after each other, essentially you going after your ex-partner in a public forum that is on the record, that your kids can then look at one day and read transcripts of. So our goal, first and foremost, is to keep people out of court, to try and dial back a lot of that anger and that vitriol that we feel going through this process and actually try to get them a bit more on the same page. And again, especially when we see children involved, you have to co-parent with this other person, hopefully for the rest of your life, right? Hopefully your children outlive you and you are forever tied to this person. So our goal is actually to get them to have the validation that they so desperately need in a private situation where maybe we're the ones validating their experience. Maybe we're the ones that are seeing them, quote unquote, for the first time and really understanding and empathizing with their journey, as opposed to hoping that you have some judge, hit his gavel and say, no, you're the better parent. No, you're the worst parent. And everyone leaves feeling shitty. You just feel awful. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
though the court process has its place, and there are circumstances whereby you absolutely need to go to court and you need those other professionals, lawyers and otherwise, the sort of validation that people are seeking really comes through a mediation process, or that's our belief, that we can actually do more healing when you work with your ex and you come to resolution together. Now you're building a solid foundation. Now you have some sort of commonalities that you can fall back on when conflict inevitably arises again, post separation, post divorce. Because just when you sign on that dotted line, it's not like all of the emotions go away.
It's just the beginning.
It's in fact just
it's
the
really
beginning.
just the beginning. And exactly. And I think that, people who go through the court process, not only the emotional strain that it has on you, but also the financial. It is such a huge, huge expense. And it leaves you feeling like, what did I just spend, tens of maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars on? Could I not have just come to that decision myself? Could we not have just negotiated that? And likely you could have. And so they're spending so much money looking for a third party to come in like on their, white horse and tell you that you were right and you were hard done by. Yeah. And it's not what you're going to find in the court system.
Yeah. I often liken it to that saying of forgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right? You forgive and you move on and you heal for you, not for vindication, not for validation from that other person. You have to do it for you. And we see a lot of that similarity through the divorce process.
As a person who survived narcissistic abuse, and by the way, I did my own filings. So I represented, I was, handled it. And because he wasn't going to handle it and he wasn't going to pay for it. And I already knew all of that. And besides, I was the one that managed the company and managed the finances and whatnot. So I filed it. And even he flew in because he was out of the country. He flew in and sat with me and signed it with me in front of me.
Wow.
But I'll tell you, here's where I already know that my listeners are like, their shackles are going up because mine went up as I'm listening to you. Because here's what I know they experienced, because it's what I experienced, is that there are some people, and the more narcissistic or psychopathic or sociopathic you are, the more entitled you feel you are, the more devious you'll act, more manipulative. And there is not enough your partner could ever give or do. You want everything. In fact, you would like to have them have nothing. That's best is if they're just a shell. So when I hear you talk, my reaction is, sure, I've been nothing but compliant this whole stinking relationship. And where has it got me? It got me really taken advantage of, horrifically taken advantage of. And now I hear mediators and lawyers say, you need to work it out, find a way for you two to come together. It's like, I am here. I am trying to come together. They're not coming here. They're not trying to come together. In fact, they're trying to take whatever they can, the last drop of blood from me if they can.
Right? Just to squeeze you dry. And I think that's where a very sort of tough mediator is needed. Right? You can't just have somebody who's forcing, or encouraging one party to make all the concessions. I think it's someone who has a really, runs a tight ship and looks out for both interests, but also recognizes when there is a power imbalance, right? That's part of our training. That's part of what we do, is to see when there's a power imbalance. We see when someone is giving maybe too much over because of fear of repercussions, or they don't want to rock the boat. And so that really goes back to, I think our skills to really, look for that.
Yeah. Yeah. We are, trained, trauma informed. By no means are we diagnosticians or any sort of mental health expert to that nth degree, whereby we are making diagnoses or similar. But we are trained in a lot of, like I said, trauma-informed, power imbalance, coercive control. We are looking for all of this. We are screening every minute of every single session. So I am happy that you pushed back on that, Kerry, because you're right. We often take a bit of a Pollyanna, approach when we think about mediation. It is this friendly, happy-go-lucky process, but not always.
Not always. We often have very high conflict cases.
Yes.
Right? Where, people are just digging in their heels, or they're showing their true colors. They're maybe showing some of those red flags, whether it's narcissism or other types of things. And we have to work with that. And that might mean bringing in their lawyers. That might mean bringing in their lawyers to sort of just, explain to their clients that this is not going to fly. And if you went to court, it's not going to fly. So it's a different approach. It's definitely a tougher approach. And they may not be happy with us, but we're also not going to let the other person get taken advantage of either.
And also, just one last note on this, often court only exacerbates the conflict and the power imbalance.
Right.
Now you
Like
have
how?
maybe you can afford a higher, sharkier, quote unquote, lawyer. And now you are out essentially billed. Like you literally can't keep paying for a lawyer. So maybe you are self-represented and you don't have anybody looking out for you. In mediation, yes, we do work for both parties. We are third-party neutrals. But like we said, there are so many different styles of mediation, right? So some couples may want like a transformational one where they are rebuilding a new foundation as co-parents and yada, yada.
And rosy.
And
but like,
some
that's
is
not always
directive, where we are giving reality checks, where we're pulling one party aside and saying, whoa, not in our session. No, thank you. We can clearly see that you are using coercive control, that you are using manipulative tactics, and we're not having any of that. So yes, we are neutral or impartial, but by all means, we are looking out to ensure that all decisions that are being made, that there is no underlying, motivations or threats or any of that for the rationale as to why someone's making a choice. And yes, people can be very covert, and there are so many things that go on behind the scenes, and it's terrifying, honestly. Even as a professional in this industry, it is really scary
to see the length that people go to manipulate and deceive and control. And I think sometimes there's your sometimes you do need a court involvement, but also a judge might read a file, spend an hour on your case, whereas we're spending, months getting to know these families and getting to know the signs of this control or of these sort of tactics. So sometimes it's hard to really, especially if you're self-represented and maybe the narcissist has a shark lawyer, it's hard to sort of paint a true picture of the history to a judge, right? So that they fully understand how this has really, been going on. What's been going on.
Right. Because one of the things that I saw happen was, I'll never forget, we sat in a car in a park alone, which I didn't think about, a few miles from the airport. He literally flew in to fly back out. I realized I'm alone in a car and there's no one around. And we didn't have any assets in the United States. We were living in another country. And that country, we already had divvied up our assets. It already was final. We already had seen attorneys there. And he sat there and said, I don't know, Kerry. I don't know, as he's looking at the financial divisions. And I said, what? We have no bank accounts. We have no property. What is there to talk about? I don't know, Kerry. And here's the problem is that often, and I know this creates a lot of confusion, the more conflictual person who's highly manipulative is very good with first impressions. They're masterful at it, which is why they're so good with the love bombing. And the victim who's been through the ringer, who's actually now, because of what they experience, has deteriorated. Their personality has deteriorated, their functioning levels deteriorated, and plus on top of it, they feel their voice has been stolen and they're terrified. They come in looking like a mess. So they look like they're the problem. And the highly conflictual person is together, calm, reflects well, makes good impression, and they come in looking great. And then it looks like, well, see, I said that this might, the conflictual person says, see, I said they're their problem, and they look like the problem. And you're right. The judge may only have a couple of minutes with this person and sees the presentation that really gives you the misinformation about what actually happened in this relationship.
And I also think that the court process gives some of these more conflictual, narcissistic people an opportunity to almost abuse through litigation. Right? So they're sending these nasty letters, writing these terrible, affidavits about the other person, and they're re-traumatizing the victim. And then the victim feels, like they're going through it all over again. And then they have to write back, and they're tens of thousands of dollars in and pleading their case again. Whereas when we're mediating, there's none of that. There's the communication's through us. We're not, especially with these high conflict, we're not having these letters go back and forth. We're not having this mud throwing going back and forth. It's not happening. So it's really designed to really protect the victim as best as the process can.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot, and I'm gonna forget some of them, but the 4 A's and the 4 C's. I don't know if you're familiar with this. So the 4 C's is typically how, let's say, the abuser shows up, right? So they're calm, they're cool, they're very charismatic, and I've lost the 4th. Whereas
Charming?
Sure, yeah. And then the victim, or the one that has been suffering through all of this abuse and control. They're showing up anxious, and that's how they present. And so court actually becomes this like a bit of a dog and pony show where they get to have this stage and they get to show up as this amazing, confident, charismatic person. Meanwhile, the victim, the person who's been experiencing all this abuse, is so agitated. They're so on edge. They're very anxious. So they don't present well. And that's what they're banking on. So instead, in mediation, we can see right through that. Again, we're trained to really parse out and to assess and understand people. That's a lot of what we do. And then because it's way cheaper than hiring a lawyer, we do spend a lot more time. There's not this rush to, let's send a letter because that's cheaper than having an hour-long meeting. Or, so we actually really get to know our clients. And as a result of that, each case is obviously so unique. And so we're able to create an agreement that is just as unique as their issues. And within a structure and a parameter, we always do a one-on-one session with each party so that we can have complete, free, confidential conversations. And a lot of that is, okay, tell me what I'm not going to see, or tell me what you think I'm going to see. And a lot of it's, they're really good speakers. They really are, charismatic, or, they're always the most popular in the room. Okay, well, if I'm now looking out for that, I can dress that down really quickly and I can say, okay, what is that? And again, maybe it's the other person overcompensating and this is not actually an instance of control or abuse of anything. Maybe that's their way of trying to undermine the process. So we're always looking out for these things and always second guessing. We do a bunch of peer mediation where we bring files to our colleagues to say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. What are you seeing? Have you experienced this? What could this be? To continue to gain other perspectives and really have a holistic view of the whole process from start to finish, as opposed to, okay, I've got my 15 minutes in court. I'm seeing you for the first time. I've read up on your file on the drive over here. Let's go. That's not our approach to separation and divorce.
It's fascinating because the state that we were divorced in was sending us to mediation. That was going to be the next step. And they were requiring us to both show up in person and do that. And even, it's just you guys even talking about it, my hands are sweating. My heart is beating so fast. It was so triggering because I knew he presented so well that I was just terrified. I was terrified of what was going to happen, that he was going to take advantage of me again, because here's a person in my situation where he came in with nothing. I came in with everything. And he wanted to walk away with half of what I came in with. And I didn't have a prenup in the United States or in the other country, which wouldn't have protected me probably anyway. But I remember thinking he's going to have one more chance to really sway everybody and to get more out of me when this is a person who's taken so much from me. Fortunately, what happened was, and I got really lucky, the clerk said, I can't give you any advice. I know that you guys are very, very careful about your limits as well. I can't give you any advice, but by the way, the piece you don't know is that my son had leukemia, was just newly diagnosed, was under care at the time. And she said, had you filed a motion asking for an early decision based on the medical condition of your son? Because I know you're in another state. And she said, no, I didn't tell you that. I didn't tell you that. So I went ahead and did it and said, I said, I can't show up for mediation. By the way, this is what's happening in my life. And the judge that afternoon signed the divorce.
Wow.
Just signed it. So I was literally divorced in weeks.
Wow. Oh, goodness.
Wow. I can't even imagine to have to go through both of those, those things. And, as you're talking about being, present with your ex-spouse and the anxiety that brought up, it reminds me of what we offer is virtual. Like we do a lot of our work is virtual. So in a lot of my files that are more higher conflict, where you get the situation where once there is a victim and there is an aggressor, I put them in what we call shuttle mediation. So they don't even see each other. So they're in two separate rooms, Zoom rooms, let's say, or virtual rooms. And I'm the one going back and forth with the message. And so I can filter the tone. They're not hearing, they're not being re-triggered by their abuser who's using certain keywords or key tones that only they know. It's not happening. It's coming through my filter. So that's sort of something that can help, another aspect of sort of protecting the victim as much as we can.
Yeah. I can only imagine so many people hearing all of this and just thinking, in fact, I once way back, right after I was widowed, I met quite a few men. And one of the men that I met, he shared with me in the first date, which he shouldn't have, that he and his wife spent $250,000 battling each other, and that it wasn't still over. And the kids were on the edge of adulthood now. So,
Yeah.
but the contentiousness never decreased, never stopped. I remember thinking, oh my, I don't want anywhere near this. That was my reaction.
Yeah.
The closure you think you're going to get doesn't come because it's still an ongoing relationship. It's still this constant battle. And so if you end and let's say a judge has ruled and, this is the decision, you think you're going to feel this relief and you're going to have this closure. But it doesn't come instantly, right? Like
it may never come.
It may never come.
You might spend $500,000 or $250,000, whatever it is on a court decision. And then if you have a partner, an ex-partner who does have that personality trait or disorder, they're going to find something else to make your life sick about. And there's no getting around it.
No.
It's like a constant waiting for the ball to drop.
Yeah.
And that's like that life of anxiety. It's like there's a common, they're planning something, right? They're planning something's going to happen. And it's an awful way for people to live.
Yeah.
And there's really no perfect solution for it to help people out of these situations, especially when there's kids involved. When there are no kids involved and you've had someone who's sort of maybe narcissistic, you can distance yourself and not really have to communicate with them ever again, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
But when you're raising children with a person like that, you're forever having to communicate and forever having to live on edge.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we just learned from another expert in coercive control that now folks, when they send an email money transfer for child support, in the message, they're putting in threats or putting in these little keywords or phrases that only the other person would recognize as a threat. So it gets, it skirts under any overseeing eyes. But the creativity and the lengths that someone will go to really know no bounds. So as much as we try to set all kinds of parameters and boundaries and set up a structure so that the process works for everyone, things are going to fall through the cracks inevitably when you are dealing with somebody with any sort of personality disorder, mental health struggles, addiction. There are so many underlying reasons and motivations for folks. And so, yes, things will slip through the cracks. Nobody is perfect. We certainly do our best, but by all means, it's a really, really difficult process. And folks going through it, these are some of the strongest people I know that have gone through it, that have come to the other side, that are still standing, that are still able to get up every morning and, go to work and
parent their kids. I always find it so fascinating how, you have one person who's trying to absolutely destroy, let's say, the mother or the father of their children, right? Meanwhile, they still have to parent their children.
And that's one of the hardest things too.
And they don't even think about the mixed message that it is that I want to love you and be in your life, but I'm going to make sure I tear away the other second most important person to you.
Yeah. The most important
you
person.
said something super powerful I want to circle back to is that, you're right. We go into these situations because we're exhausted, because so much bad has happened. We want it to be over. We're looking for closure. And you're right that this legal situation is not going to give any closure. Yeah, you may end up divorced, and you certainly will probably, hopefully, separate at some level, equitably or not, the assets. Yeah. And there will be some, if there's kids involved, custody agreement made that you may like or may not like. But to find closure, it's not going to happen. I just thank you for saying that, because I think people really need to hear that. I wanted closure. I know a lot of people who go into this want closure.
Of course.
And you're going to get it from other areas. It's from support networks. It's from maybe finding other, let's say, women who've gone through it, right? Also therapy, all that is where you're going to get the closure from. You're not going to get it from the person that has tried to destroy you. You're going to get it from the people who love and support you. And also with time. I think time is really your best friend in this situation, because it gives you the clarity and the space from the incidents to really reflect on it and not let it affect you in the same way.
I urge people to find their own closure, to make their own closure.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it might be from doing something for yourself. Like, you know what? Like let's say it's changing your career, starting a business, doing something for you that you can be proud of. And that's where the closure, I think comes from.
Yeah. But time is a good one. Sorry, I was just going to jump in to say, in a similar vein, to remind folks that it is a grieving process. And that comes in waves, and that is not linear. You could feel really good one day, and for absolutely no reason that anyone else could see, you get set back. And that's a day, or two that you spend in bed and you just can't function. And that's okay. And then, a week later, it could be completely different. Now you're pissed off and you're angry and you want vindication. That's okay too, provided that those emotions are not guiding your decision.
That's a tough one, right? It's a very tough one because you're so highly emotional. You're in this anxious, highly emotional state. And that's when you have to make a decision about parenting time and who's getting what part of the business or what have you. And so as Alex was talking, we've started this community, this online community where people can gather. It's called the DL community, where people can gather online and share their stories and find that support and that closure and that comfort in people going through the same thing. Like I always tell my clients, like, your divorce is unique, but it's not.
Yeah.
I can promise you, like, when they say to me, oh, you've not heard this story before, you haven't heard that, can you believe what happened? And I'm like, unfortunately, I have heard it before. So it's really about finding your support networks. And you might be the first person in your social group or your family group that's gone through divorce. You might have to step outside of that. And it might be even better to step outside of that because you're talking to people who don't have an interest in your story.
Mm-hmm. There's no stake in the outcome for when you look at family and friends, they're so vested in your outcome. With strangers and people who understand it because they've gone through it, they're just there to be a support
more
system.
Objective.
Yeah, way more objective. So finding that support wherever it comes from, and specifically for the experience that you had. To Amanda's point, yes, it's unique, but there are commonalities. And if there are people that are going through and divorcing a narcissist or somebody, with other kinds of mental health, well, they can relate. They've literally gone through it. And so many of those, let's say, diagnoses are similar, right? We have similar personality traits when you are a narcissist. So
the behaviors are the same. There's financial control. There's litigation abuse. There's all the things that come with it. It's like, it's the same story.
Yeah.
It's the same recipe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a playbook out there. That's how it feels. Exactly. Well, this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today and giving this really great information. We're going to hop over to the podcast extra. And what I'd love to get into there with you both is how can people, especially if they're the victim, coming in feeling just distraught, exhausted, wore out, maybe even severely underrepresented, how can they come into mediation in a more prepared way? What kind of things that you would like them that maybe to think through as they step in? So we're going to hop over and talk about that. But thank you so much for joining me today on this. It's been wonderful talking to both of you.
Thank you, Kerry. The pleasure is all ours.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? Find me at Kerry McAvoy, Ph.D. Now you don't need to wait a week to get your next podcast fix. Join Breaking Free from Narc Abuse at Substack.com to get exclusive audio content for subscribers. To sign up, click the link in the show notes. And whether you're in, consider leaving, or have left a narcissistic relationship, find community support at my Toxic Free Relationship Club. You can learn about this resource as well as others at KerryMcAvoyPhD.com. And I'll see you back here next week.